I was born abandoned outdoors in the heat-shaped air drifting like spirits in old windows. I was born a fraction and a cipher and a ledger entry. I was an index of first lines when I was born. I was born waist deep, stubborn in the water, crying, ain't I a woman and a brother? I was born to this hall of mirrors, this horror story. I was born with a prologue of references, pursued by mosquitoes and thieves. I was born passing off the problem of the 20th century. I was born. I read minds before I could read fishes and loaves. I walked a piece of the way alone before I was born. So, my aunt, I get this email from my father's sister from Atlantic City. There's a picture in the email of this guy dressed in this really garish suit, and the subject line of the email is Atlantic City Pimp. And I'm trying to figure out why my aunt is sending me this picture. And then I realized that she intended it to go to her brother. And then I'm trying to figure out why was she sending it to my father? What is coded? What critique is coded in her sending this picture to my father? So this is the poem that comes out of that. Attachment, Atlantic City Pimp. Left of the @ sign, the email address was ethnically gendered with the nonce noun sister, which I have to confess I scoffed at, thinking it was from some self-discovering student of mine, before realizing it was my aunt who sent the JPEG from her cell phone. My aunt, who doesn't mind a bit of shell if it means getting all the crab meat, who was known to only leave behind enough of a tip to shame the waitstaff for their inattention. The subject line read AC Pimp, as if her painted nails and belly laugh made her expert in the fauna of pimps, a soul-stirred savant of things cold-blooded. As if she could divine an ivory-handled derringer holstered at his breast, icing the steel heart cognate to the gun, that twin ventriloquist of tinder and sulfur dust, that rhythmic and delicate organ pumping like a fist that has a knack for snake eyes and the superfluity of bruises that follow every spaghetti-strapped back talker's doubt. She must have thought she'd reached her brother, my father, who harbors like a gold molar a taste for robin egg and mauve pocket squares, a flourish of trim, a hand stitch, lapels check-striped and foreshortened like Tyrannosaurus arms, and ostrich print Stacey Adams to match. The modest feathered derby contrasting all those boas festooning street lamps and mailboxes. But my aunt is no mere expert. AC may have been a random tag, but that word pimp bore the import of all us do-wrong men. She was, in effect, signifying the kind of humor that waters the eye, the double talk, the shadow dialect. Like her spite-tinged smile at a bridal shower, her patina of derision enlivened the photo. My aunt, who refuses to settle for a man less Christian than she is, finds everywhere despicable men. Hence the dozens via email, the critique like a razor inside a roll of 20s, the currency of our vengeance economy. Perhaps there was an untroubled sea just beyond the garish casinos behind him, a stilt walker or mine outside the frame, a carnival and boardwalk where the horizon would be, and a tour bus full of people waving. Of all the images that might speak to something inside of her, this was the one she found worth saving. So, like so many poets, I make my living teaching. And one of the things that we're often called upon to do is to create courses, devise new courses. And so I'm in the habit of writing these course descriptions in it. And I find myself having fun thinking of courses, irreverent courses that I would love to actually teach, but I know there's no way I would ever get a chance to do so. So So I let myself run with that for a little bit. This is called Shades of Green, Envy and Enmity in the American Cultural Imaginary. Images of the stud and the buck have an amorously crafted resonance, burnished by cultural anxieties and addicts' logic toward the habit they place in the mind and the mysteries we lay at their feet. This course will begin by focusing on models represented in the 1994 Charles Russell film, The Mask, and Ang Lee's 2003, The Hulk, the mojo and the genetic regression, the hypersexuality and the rage. These qualities are thrust and airbrushed onto the Bacchic body of the other as we fantasize our repression of them in ourselves, the unquiet threat of psychosomatic dreaming, a silk garret, an onanistic envy of the other's capacity for release, a monumental iconography of the hermetical black box of the brain. While we might be tempted to reduce these types to the pat dichotomy of comedy and tragedy, this course will examine the ways in which there is but one mask, a Janus-faced cleavage of thou art and thus am I, our goat-sung desires adrift in the wilderness, our telltale passions pulsing beneath the tulips and gladiolas in the mildewed hat box, the act of masking triumphal and deadly, trembling the bulb on its stem. I don't think I'll get to finish that. So I live in New York, and one of the things that has disappointed me of late, lots of things to criticize New York for, one of the things that has disappointed me of late is that they totally redid the front of the Metropolitan Museum. There were these fountains that I am quite fond of, and they removed them completely and are doing something absolutely wacky. So it's a set in front of the Metropolitan Museum. And I'm going to add one of those things I hate when people do. This is a true story. This actually happened. Wishing well. Outside the Met, a man walks up, sun tweaking the brim sticker on his starter cap, and he says, "Pardon me, old school." He says, "You know, is this a wishing well?" "Yeah, son," I say sideways over my shrug. "Throw your bread on the water." I tighten my chest, wheezy as Rockaway beach sand with a pull of faux smoke from my e-cig to cozy the truculence I hotbox alone, and I am at the museum because it is not a bar. Because he appears not to have changed them in days, I eye the heel-chewed hems of his pants and think probably he will ask me for 50 cents any minute now. Wait for it. A smoke or something. Central Park displays the frisking transparency of autumn, tracing paper sky, leaves like eraser crumbs gum the pavement. As if deciphering celestial script, I squint and purse off toward the roof line of the museum aloof as he fists 2 pennies from his pockets, mumbling, and then aloud, "My man," he says, "Hey, my man, I'm going to make a wish for you too." I'm laughing now, so what? You want me to sign a waiver? He laughs along. Ain't say all that, he says, but you do have to hold my hand. And close your eyes. I make a starless night of my face before he asks, "Are you ready?" "Yeah, dog, I'm ready." Sure, let's do this." His rough hand in mine inflates like a blood pressure cuff, and I squeeze back as if we are about to step together from the sill of all resentment and timeless toward the dream source of unneeding. The two of us hurtle, sharing the cosmic breast of plenitude, when I hear the coins blink against the surface, and I cough up daylight like I've just been dragged ashore. "See now, you'll never walk alone," he jokes, and is about to hand me back to the day he found me in, like I was a rubber duck. And he says, "You've got to let go." But I feel bottomless, and I know he means well, though I don't believe it. I feel myself shaking my head no when he means let go his hand. So I'm going to wrap up with a couple of poems from a series that I became fascinated with just the sort of everyday violence that we put up with, that we internalize, the aggressions that we make normal in our lives. And so I have a series of poems dealing with that. And also, my children were much younger at the time I started writing these poems, which took me several years to complete. Problema 3, the number. The Fulton Street food town is playing Motown, and I'm surprised at how quickly my daughter picks up the tune. And soon the two of us, plowing rows of goods steeped in fructose under light thick as corn oil, are singing, "Baby, I Need Your Lovin'," unconscious of the lyrics' foreboding. My happy child riding high in a shopping cart as if she's cruising the polished aisles on a tractor laden with imperishable foodstuffs. Her cornball father enthusiastically prompting with spins and flourishes and the double-barrel fingers of a gunslinger's pose. But we hear it as we round the rice and Goya aisle, that other music, the familiar exchange of anger, the war drums of parent and child. The boy wants what? To be carried? To eat the snacks right from his mother's basket? What does it matter? He's making a scene. With no self-interest beyond the pleasure of replacing wonder with wonder, my daughter asks me to name the boy's offense. I offer to buy her ice cream. How can I admit recognizing the portrait of fear the mother's face performs, the inherited terror of nonconformity, frosted with a fear of being thought disrespected by or lacking the will to discipline one's child? How can I account for both the cultural and the intercultural? The boy's cries rising like hosannas as the mother's purse falls from her shoulder, her missed step from the ledge of one of her stilted heels, passion loosed with each displaced hairpin, his little jacket bunched at the collar where she has worked the marionette. Later, when I'm placing groceries on the conveyor belt, and it is clear I've forgotten the ice cream, my daughter tries her hand at this new algorithm of love. Each word punctuated by her little fist. "Boy," she commands, "didn't I tell you?" I'll wrap up with this one. This is the fourth in that series. Thank you, by the way. At 13, I asked my father for a tattoo. I might as well have asked for a bar mitzvah. He said I had no right to alter the body he gave me. Aping what little of Marx I learned from the sisters down the street who wore torn black stockings with Doc Martens, I said I was a man because I could claim my body and the value of its labor. This meant I could adorn it or dispose of it as I chose. Tattoos, my father said, are like children. Have one, you'll want another. I knew there was a connection between the decorated body and reproduction. This was why I wanted a tattoo. Yet I reasoned not in so many words. His analogy only held in the case of possession, i.e., I possess my body but cannot possess my children. His laughter was my first lesson in the human Ponzi scheme of paternalism. The self-electing indenture to the promise of material inheritance, men claiming a hollow authority because simply their fathers had claimed a hollow authority. Knowing I had little idea as to what my proposed tattoo might resemble, my father sent me to my room to sketch it using the pastels he had given me for Christmas. Based on his critique, he said he would consider my request. But he'd already taken the shine from my swagger. How can I beautify what I do not possess and call it anything but graffiti? Chris Rock says my first job is to keep my daughter off the pole. Whether or not I agree with him, I get his point. As a father myself, I now see every mutinous claim of independence as the first steps toward my sweet peas falling in with a bad crowd. Richard Pryor says we're bound to screw up our kids one way or another. My father would split the difference. I made you, he'd say. I can unmake you and make another one just like you.
great. Thank you, Greg. All right, we'll now open the floor for questions. Do we have any questions for our readers?
I'm making a setup here for nothing.
So, this is for Gregory Harlow. I read Totem, actually brought it here with me, and I wanted to know how long it took you to write that book. And I also see that you kind of mix your interests, like, you know, there's a poet, there's a scholarly person there too, so you can talk more about your process and, yeah.
Well, so for the first question, I started writing, I think there's one poem that ended up, one poem that was in my MFA thesis that ended up in the book. And so that book, and the titles changed, and I'm too embarrassed to tell you what the titles were previous to the Totem. But they were shameful. So the title changed and the book kept changing. I think I started, so I did my MFA in 2001. I started sending the manuscript out in 2004 and just kept at it. Okay, I was probably a little more ambitious, and I think I started sending it out in 2003. But it kept coming back, of course, and so I kept writing it. So it's from 2001 to 2006, I was basically pretty much writing that book the whole time. It was a constant, and that's kind of what my process is now in general, because I always have like 10 or 15 poems that are in motion, and that as I go through my day, whatever comes into, you know, if we're thinking about it, if we're conscious of the things that we're writing, then our day will pick up. You know, we'll pick up cues and material that will end up in the poems. So that's my process. The other question, so I started working on a PhD in 2004. For some crazy reason, I think it's fun to read a lot of really dense theory. For a couple of reasons. One, I genuinely enjoy the feeling of sort of synapses bursting in my head as I'm reading stuff. But also, it helps my creative work because it forces me to think in ways that I don't ordinarily think. The same thing